Well, welcome to Parker X, everyone, and thanks for joining us. Today we're following and continuing our series about future speculation. And I'm joined today by my esteemed colleague, Brett Wood. Hi, Brett. How are things?
Things are well. Good to see you again, Brett.
Great. Great. We're missing Lester, so it's going to be more confusing because it's the Brett and Brett show. But we're also joined by Jacob Gonzalez from WGI. How are things in Houston, Jacob?
Oh, things are great. It's a bit hot. We have a heat advisory out right now. I think it's 100 degrees today, but we're surviving.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us on this journey. I think we'll learn a thing or two today. We're hoping to inspire a little bit and make people think a little differently. I think that's something that's always fun to do. The subject of the episode is around a conversation or remark that Lester made on our last call, and that was related to, if I was going to build a structure today, what would it look like? And that involves, I think, considering all the things that look out to a 12 and 25 and maybe 50-year time horizon, depending on the use of the facility. So I think what it might be useful to do is just get more of an idea about, Jacob, your history and what you enjoy doing. I know you're a parking tragic like us, and you've been in the industry for a long time. Do you want to start at the start and how you sort of fell into parking?
Sure, I sure can do that. First of all, I
Thanks.
want to thank you guys for having me on board. It's exciting. Like I said before, I love talking parking, and you guys are going to have to put the timeout sign for me to stop. So it all started at the very beginning of my career when I joined at the time Walsh P. Moore at the structural firm as an intern. And since the very beginning, I was working on the Texas Medical Center Parking Access Revenue Control Project. And it was at the time the largest transition from pay at exit at the kiosk to pay on foot. So at the time, it was 22 years ago, it was a leading technology and something new. And putting that into a 30,000 space system was not an easy feat. So right off the bat, I got into parking and fell in love with it from the very beginning. And what attracted me to it was the fact that not one solution fits all of the challenges that are out there. And so it kind of resonates with me because it's also the type of folks that we run into. We see a lot of people with different backgrounds, with different experiences, and you really have to learn how to integrate those expertise into a project to create a truly integrated, well-balanced solution. So from the beginning, I was attracted to it, to the parking world. I also dabbled a little bit in the restoration world. I used to walk 20 garages for Texas Medical Center and do the restoration reviews and structural reports for Texas Medical Center. So my first 11 years, I spent a lot of time serving that client. And through that process, one of the things that we learned is that the sophistication level that they had, their expectations were above and beyond something I'd ever seen up until this day still. And the reason I'm driving this story into the point is the fact that they demanded flexibility. And so we had to integrate various scenarios, and we ran different gaming scenarios throughout every design we did to understand how our garage was going to expand vertically, expand horizontally, how we were going to add existing parking equipment system, how we were going to add pedestrian crosswalks. In fact, I had one that we built a garage where the foundation was adjacent to the metro rail, and we had to put in some testing monitors in the foundation so that stray currents can be measured. But the point is that we thought about everything just because of the gaming exercise that we did. So flexibility is built into my DNA, and it's one of the reasons we're pushing that across all of our disciplines at WGI. In fact, in the parking world, we're focusing on what we call Flex Park, and that's all about adaptive reuse and what the future holds. So it's something that's very near and dear to my heart. So I'm glad to be on and talking about this subject.
Great.
That's interesting. So, and I love the topic of adaptive reuse. And as we've realized that our industry is changing and demand car parking, autonomous vehicles could change it even further into the future. We've been kind of teeing up this adaptive reuse. How how have you seen that change over the last few years, and even now as we're dealing with kind of what comes out of the other side of COVID? How has adaptive reuse kind of, for lack of a better term, adapted? Because at one point it was just let's build a garage that can be something else, but I'm now seeing all these tentacles that become what can this garage become beyond just residential or office or those types of things.
Yeah, so that's a great question, Brett. I think to that point, we were already toying with the idea of building a garage with a ramping system where the top two floors would be converted to maybe a park on top or a residential level on the top floor, and then reduce the ramping system, maybe a circular ramping system going up. We have a whole presentation on that we present. But what we've seen, to answer your question about COVID-19, it's accelerated um, our clients to adapt it even faster. And the reason I'm saying that is a lot of the things that you're seeing, like at the grocery retailers that are now having a surge of people coming to pick up their groceries and ordering ahead of time. And so a lot of the e-retail is it increasing. So we're having to make adjustments to how the Targets of the world and the Walmarts of the world are basically selling and delivering their products. And so not only does it change the way we drive and park and pick up our purchases, it's also changing the way their retail stores are programmed, right? So instead of having space for everyone to come and shop and pick out their clothes or their food, they're having to create space so that they can actually store and maintain the space and then fulfill orders within their own program space, but also how they touch the client, the new way they touch the client with a touchless transaction, so to speak. So we're seeing an advancement of what we were already projecting to happen 20 years down the road is now happening a lot faster. And so it's exciting because we're working with national clients right now that we're managing all across the country that are taking this flex park idea and implementing it into our design, our baseline designs right now. So, and we're getting to, game out what's happening today, but also talk about what's happening in the future. I mean, we're talking about, all right, how do we take the roof now that's designed for parking, have the flexibility to make it residential, but also turn it into a drone landing and taking off or picking up, basically the retail and the purchases that we have and the deliveries that we have for mobility hubs. So we're seeing the true integration of a lot of things that we were already planning for just happening a lot faster, and it's exciting.
That is really exciting. Yeah,
It's a significant change, I would imagine, driven by an external source. How regulated is that now? Is it easy to adapt without much change in the operational or structural design requirements that are stipulated by the local authority?
Well, that's a great question. So what's happening is, for parking a vehicle, usually we're about 50 pounds per square foot requirement, but for occupied space, in the worst case scenario, you're more about 150. So you do have to invest into a little bit beefier structural system, foundation system, depending on what kind of load you're going to imply in the future. But some of the stuff we were already doing, for example, because of the fact that in a medical center we want to basically disrupt the operation the least amount as possible. So we're already designing roofs at the 150 pounds per square foot to take the additional load of the shoring, because we're building these cast in place structures. And when you shore, you have to shore down multiple levels. And when you do that, you take out levels of parking, which cannot happen in a medical center that's operating 24/7. So a lot of times our tactic has always been to recommend and implement that 150 pounds per square foot load on the roof. And then that would allow all the shoring to basically stop at that top level and not disrupt the two levels below that. And so if you're already taking that approach because you're building a flexible garage, then you're already designing that for almost a maximum capacity, and you can then have a lot more flexibility on that roof. So again, I think that's the importance of us running various scenarios with the clients and walking through all the various options that can happen. And then what we like to do is we like to line them up and say option A, B, C, D, and of all those options, your initial investment is so many dollars, but then we always tie in the life cycle costs as well. So we want them to understand what the life cycle cost would be through these impacts, so that they're making a decision one time and they're confident with their decision and they don't go back on the decision. So a lot of times we just kind of bundle it up, give it to them, and we create what we call this decision log, and then they have to go through the decision log, and it tells them what the dollar impact is, what the schedule impact is, and what the life cycle cost impact is. And it's been a pretty good, effective tool to get the right decisions made for them to build in as much flexibility as possible.
That's interesting. So, I mean, one of the questions I have, and going back to some of the loading, like that's been the conundrum all along with adaptive reuse, is that vehicles are 50 pounds per square inch, and human loading is triple that, just because of the density of. You talked about like drones and goods, and does the storage of goods, like if we had like an Amazon fulfillment area on the top level of a garage, is that also 150 psi, or
it can be about that much, but it could be more too. So again, I think what's happening is we're seeing more requirements from those type of owners than what the code requires sometimes. So because they just have a lot heavier requirements right now.
So when you look at the structure, you're also looking at the airspace above the structure and how close it is to a serviceable market where it comes to deliveries and alternative uses.
Yep, FAA requirements and everything else that you have to look at when you're talking about future flights like that.
Are we seeing a general reduction in the size of structures compared to what you may have seen 5 years ago?
I think in general, we're seeing definitely a trend of the mega structures and the bigger structures are fewer and far between, and we're seeing a lot more 200, 300 space garages for municipalities that are out there to serve their needs. And in those scenarios, we're running site analysis on which site makes the most sense for them, and that's very typical. But then we have been integrating retail space and other spaces in there, but we're still having those conversations about adaptive reuse and how they're going to change their uses in the future. They're not as they don't push the envelope as much as a medical center does or a.
What do you see? I mean, like, I know it can vary site to site, state to state, whatever, but like the cost difference between just building a traditional structure versus building it's something that's adaptive, or you're adapting the top level at 150. I mean, order of magnitude, what's the cost difference there for a city?
I think the average of all the studies that we've done to date, the premium has been roughly 20%, of increase if you're trying to do a fully adaptive reuse on their facilities. So, and this is, implementing a lot of different things that will allow the additional stairs, a flatter floor, higher floor heights, and the additional loading, because there's more than just the loading that we're talking about, right? So typically we'll see about a 20% premium that would have to be invested to make it adaptive, and that usually is enough to get the municipalities to say no. And again, there's probably a range. It's probably more like 15 to 40%, depending on the size and the efficiency of the layout. But I would say the average is about 20%, which is no significant number, because you're talking about right now, our study showed that the average was $22,000 a space. 20% is an additional $4,000 per space. I mean, that's nothing to laugh at, for sure.
When you've got 300 spaces, it adds up very quickly. Yeah,
it does. It does. Damn. But you've got to also look at the life cycle of the structure, what it's designed for, and if you're designing something for 50 years, and even your projections, Brett, as well as mine, are probably showing a 30 to 40 year before the autonomous vehicles actually are fully autonomous level 5, and that's going to come into play, as well as some of the things that are changing in our everyday lives. We're going to have to think about how we plan for the future and how that investment really is. So how much would it cost to tear this facility down? in some cities where you have additional sites, it's not as a big deal. But if you're in a more dense city where land is extremely expensive, now you're talking about maybe it does make sense to invest that additional 20%. So you also got to look at each scenario and have a case by case analysis on what the value is for that particular client.
Jacob, when you're looking at the structure, we've talked a little bit about the rooftop. What about the pedestrian level at grade, the street level? Do you look at that as a space that is also an alternative use and act as a mobility hub, an entry point, exit point, when you look at that horizon of automated vehicles?
Absolutely. I mean, that's something we just did in a project that we're working on with the medical center, where we made the drop-off pickup area 3 times bigger than what it needed to be, so that we can handle not only the 2 valet operations that we were going to run there in the immediate need, but also in the future when autonomous vehicles are really implemented into a medical center scenario. And we ran obviously our modeling on that, and it showed that was the right size for the future as well. So we're definitely already implementing ground floor flexibility and future proofing scenarios in our designs today. And that's a little more something that they have more of an appetite for, because of the fact that they can make it a nice green space today in a smaller drop-off area, and then expand into that green space in the future. So it's something that they're willing to do, and the cost is not as much as actually the structure itself. And so we're seeing those accepted a lot more.
Okay. Thanks. Brett's nodding at me that I can ask another question. Thank you, Brett.
Yeah.
One of the things I was thinking about last time we were on a call is we take the lead from different parts of the world at different times. And China can build a whole hospital, which I know you're familiar with hospitals, in a matter of a couple of weeks. Are you taking a lead or having a look at what they're doing in Indian subcontinent, China, Middle East, those places where development can happen unrestricted in speeds that I guess we're really not familiar with in our countries? How are they attacking those challenges, and do you see anything from them that sort of points to what a future might be?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that's another area of innovation that our company's looking at, and that's the modular approach, right? And they've been doing that for quite some time, and we've been dabbling in it in a little, here and there. In fact, I just had a meeting with a company called NMG who specializes in that, and they pre-build the entire suite of a hospital room, and then basically they build it, they design it, and then they assemble it, make sure it's all sorted out, and then they ship it there, and it gets built on site, right? So it's all pre-manufactured, pre-built, and pre-designed. And so, and again, this is another example how COVID pushed the innovation and pushed things that we're already toying with and talking about and doing into an accelerated mode, and brought it, to fruition a lot faster. And so he was telling me that they were doing the same thing, putting together a temporary space for COVID patients, and they basically took this pre-designed modular system and deployed it and built it. So it's something that our company has been looking at, obviously with those type of solutions. They're out there. We're looking at them. We're studying them. But it's interesting you bring that up, because even before COVID, about 2 years ago, we came up with what we're calling a ParkMax solution. It's off-the-shelf garage design, not a precast garage design, but off-the-shelf cast in place. So it still has the durability that you want, but it's already designed. We have a construction cost and we have a construction schedule, and all you need to do is built for a typical site. So a developer could come and say, hey, we want this ParkMax solution. Does it work for us, and how much is it going to be? So our team will get together with our construction partner and basically just sit down with them and say, here it is, and it's pre-designed, and most of the stuff's already ready to go. And so it accelerates the schedule, accelerates everything, but it doesn't lose the durability. So that's like a hybrid modular solution, but it's also it's a solution that we can still hit a lot of our durability requirements for a hospital type environment, and they have a 50, 100-year life cycle that they want to hit. So
it would be interesting to develop out as new technologies in construction materials occur, a modular arrangement where you could, as density grows in particular areas and changes, you could then modify the structure and take it, even relocate it if you needed to, or relocate portions of it to an area where it was needed.
We actually looked at one at a university campus a couple of years ago where they had a temporary parking issue, and it was, what if we put up a modular garage that's 2 levels, and then we can simply take it and put it somewhere else when they need to develop that space. They ultimately didn't go with it because they wanted something that was a little bit more in the context of the campus, and the modular design typically is going to be a little bit more erector set looking, or at least the one we were looking at. But I wonder, Jacob, I mean, have you seen those types of garages start gaining traction here in the U.S. where people want to just put something up on a temporary basis, and it's simpler to do that than it is to go into the entire concrete structure?
We certainly have gotten that question asked also from universities as well, as they they're expanding and they need to put some parking up very quickly because they're investing in all these buildings, and they, like most of them, they say, well, what about parking when it's too late? And so it's something they definitely look into, and there are solutions out there. And you're right, Brett, they're very clunky and they're not durable at all, but there are solutions there. And I haven't seen an increase of that of late, but I think part of the reason why is because the precast solution, and not the precast solution that's a 30-year or 50-year solution, but there's the low-cost providers that are out there that can do a 20-year precast solution. It gets so close to that cost that they end up just doing the precast. And so because of the precast 2-level solution being so close in cost, I think that the temporary guys just couldn't get the cost model to work for them. And that's at least my opinion when I looked at it probably 5 years ago. So they got to close the gap if they want to be successful, I would think. Or I should say expand the gap.
Yeah.
And be cheaper.
That's right. Yeah. I'm intrigued. I mean, this is all like the future of design, is obviously constantly up in flux, and you guys are doing a great job of adapting to that. One of the things that's like on my mind right now is, somebody that owns a 400 space parking garage today that, let's say it's a parking operator in, Cleveland, Ohio, that traditionally has sold leased space to office buildings. And if those office tenants, they become more remote after all of this, they realize the value of having some type of hybrid workforce. Are they going to start coming to us and saying, how do we adapt this space for something else? And what can our answer even be? Because it was obviously designed not for anything but vehicular loading. Have you heard of anybody start asking that question, and where does that go if they start asking it?
I think in theory that question, we've been running that scenario as well and expecting that and anticipating that. And I think, it's interesting because we do a lot of vertical expansions and a lot of horizontal expansions to existing garages. So it is possible. You could certainly retrofit a garage to take on an occupied space. You're going to have to do some special things with adding stairwells to get the occupancy requirements and that sort of thing, and you have to live with lower floor-to-floor heights. But I think one of the ideas that I was talking to our team about is, what if we deconstruct a level or two to basically decompress the load on the foundation, and then go up with 1 level or 2 levels of what you really want to be on there. So you still have the parking garage below, but then on the top 2 levels can be office space, or really residential space, because that's probably what's going to go there. If office space is moving to a more hybrid solution, like what we're all working from home probably, like we may be doing in the future, that could very well be the case. So we've talked about that. We also, because of our experience with vertical expansion, use different systems like steel systems that are a little bit lighter than full concrete. But again, you've got to run the structural calculations on how the existing system works, what the lateral loads are, and what the new wind load requirements may be based on when that structure was built. So there is an assessment process that we have to go through to make sure we know okay, based on this existing structure, and this is what you can do to that. And that phase one assessment is extremely valuable, and it's not as expensive as people think. And so a lot of times we will do that assessment, review the existing documents if they're available, run the calculations, and then provide a few scenarios on how to expand. So from that perspective, the only thing you're doing is you're changing the occupancy. You're not doing anything different than what we've done in the past when we expanded to additional parking. You're just changing what's going above.
Right.
So it's something that can be done, and not very, it's not very difficult. And that's the good thing about having a multidiscipline firm. We've got guys that do structural engineering more than just garages. We're doing full blown towers and mixed use developments all over the country. So we have the ability to bring that to the table, and provide, like I said, that balanced solution, that integrated solution to our partners.
Great. Well, thank you. Thanks for spending a little time with us. We've gone just on 40 minutes of, actually just on half an hour or so of talking. In terms of the question that I wanted to circle back to for a quick opinion on is, in 10 years' time, what structures will you be building, do you think? So if you were to cast your mind into that distance, I guess parking structures are parking structures, and they're evolving more, more than probably you've seen in the last 20 years you've been involved in the industry. Do you have a sort of a thought or an inkling of when you're sitting down in 10 years' time what you might be doing? Is it more of the same, or is it something that is a significant shift from what you see today?
I think it's going to be definitely some hybrid integrated systems, is what I'm expecting. We're seeing a lot more mechanical garages, automated garages being looked at and starting to be built. And so when you start future proofing for a client, you've got to start looking at all kinds of scenarios. And when you do that, you're definitely going to get more unconventional garages. So I anticipate more mixed use for sure, and more flexibility in every design we do. So, and we've been trending toward this for quite some time, as we all know. But again, I think COVID has accelerated some things, and in 10 years, I would expect to see our garages to be designed for different things in the future. And they may not look different. They're still going to probably be concrete, because I think the concrete combination is still going to be the most optimal way to construct it. But I think it's definitely going to have flexibility built in that folks may never even see. But they will be different.
Brett, any speculation from you?
I mean, I think they're on the right track. I mean, I honestly think garages become centers of activity for a lot more of things, especially I agree with Jacob. I mean, full maturity of an automated vehicular system is a ways out. Elon Musk has got, automated vehicles out there on the road now, but all of us having them and sharing them is a ways out. And so we have to kind of adapt our design over the next 10 to 15 years to think about that evolution. So Jacob's hit every thought that I've had, the thought of mobility hubs, goods movement, kind of building them for people loading in places. As long as we're making those decisions now and helping guide, municipalities, universities, hospitals down that path, I think we're doing the right thing.
Mobility hubs, modular internals. I want to talk about air quality systems, maybe 3D printing as part of it, a whole range of things. Different configurations between the structure changing, as well as the system between after hours use and during the day use. Things like that I think might be interesting to have a look at. Self-cleaning, those aspects. I don't know. I'm having a.
You're really
spitball
going
fun.
out there into the future.
I'm going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like it.
Completely.
I like
Yeah. I mean, we look at vehicle sharing and how that works and how that might be a part of it, how vehicles dwell. Car sales, car hire, all of those things. Drop off food, pick up food. I don't know. I'm having a bit of fun.
I think you're onto
Healthcare
something
systems.
there. I think you're onto something there, Brett. I think we're going to see a lot more people around found inside of garages that may be adjacent to the garage portion of it and the vehicle storage portion of it. And they'll be interacting, and whether it's adjacent to a dense downtown area or within the middle of the downtown area, I think it's going to be something where people people come and gather, and where goods gather and where cars gather. It's not just going to be cars anymore. So I think that's the direction we're going, and it'd be interesting to see in 10 years from now when we're still around consulting if we were right or not.
Very good. Very good.
That's right.
Well, if anyone else has thoughts out there or some wild ideas to share, let's hear them. Thanks for joining us today, Jacob, and thank you, Brett.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
anytime, and good catching up, Jacob.
Yeah, you too, Brett. It's always good to talk, and if you have anything else you want to talk about, let me know.
Thank you for listening to the Parker X podcast. We sincerely appreciate it and hope you are enjoying our content. Please remember to rate, review, comment, subscribe, and share. And follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. The following has been a production of Parker X.